Welcome to Cracked Open, a podcast about life, love, loss, and the truths we discover along the way. Together, we'll explore the struggles that shape us, the lessons we carry, and the hope that keeps us moving forward. This is more than stories. It's honesty. It's healing. It's real. Let's get started. And now your host, Glenn Nunes.
Welcome to Cracked Open. This is your host, Glenn Nunes. This is episode 2 of Season 2, and thank you for being here and listening to the podcast. Recently, I had a few conversations about the podcast, and I received some great feedback from listeners. I really appreciated it because this is going to help me going forward with the podcast. And as I always say, the feedback is encouraged, good or bad. And I want this to hopefully be encouraging and informative going forward. So any polishing I can do is always a good thing, right? A friend of mine was playing one of his first gigs, and I was trying to go support him because he's a musician. As I walked in, somebody that I knew noticed me, because those of you who don't know, I am a musician. I do many gigs, and I got to know a lot of people from being in the music scene. So I was talking to this one guy who has been listening to the podcast, and he gave me some great pointers. He was a little shy about talking to me. He said, I don't know if you get easily offended. I told him I do not. And he opened up and gave me a lot of pointers, and it really helped. And if you're listening, thank you for the tips. When I do these, I always say I do a lot of research. I take my own life experiences. I go to church. I listen to the sermons. I read the Bible. I get stuff off the internet. I watch podcasts. And I was recently watching a podcast with Joe Rogan. And one of the things he said was, don't listen to any of the comments. Just ignore them and just keep doing what you're doing. And he's a great podcaster. But on the other hand, I listen to the comments, and especially when people call me. And I'm going to take all these comments as constructive criticism, good or bad. So as a new podcaster, I am definitely going to listen to the comments. So I encourage them. So I appreciate anybody who has interacted with me, okay? So that being said, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in today. And I want to thank those of you who have subscribed or shared or liked the Cracked Open podcast. I really appreciate it. And if you haven't, I would ask that you do, and I want to thank you in advance for doing so. So today, I want to talk about something that we all carry, whether we admit it or not: regret. Okay? Most people think regret means you did something wrong, but a lot of times regret isn't about what you did. It's about what you didn't see clearly at the time, or it's about trusting something that you felt real, or staying too long, or leaving too soon, or realizing too late that you were operating with the information that you had, not the information that you wish you had now. Regret is often just awareness that arrived late. And the problem is, once regret shows up, people don't know what to do with it. Some people punish themselves with it. Some people rewrite the past to avoid it. Some people harden their heart so they don't have to feel it again. But regret isn't meant to destroy you. It's meant to teach you. So today isn't about fixing the past. It's not about blaming yourself or anyone else. And it's definitely not about pretending things didn't matter. Okay? It's about learning how to live with regret without letting it define you. Because if you don't understand regret, it can trap you. But if you do, it can actually make you clearer, stronger, and more grounded than you were before. Okay, so regret isn't just bad news. It's a great topic, I think, to discuss, because regret is very common and it's relatable to all of us. And regret can feel heavy because of shame and self-blame, but regret can be a powerful tool. We can learn from it. Regret comes in many forms. You could have regret from not saving money, maybe not eating healthier, not taking a chance that you should have taken, not being true to yourself, ethical lapses, not doing the right thing, cheating on somebody, or whatever, neglecting a situation, neglecting a relationship, neglecting your job, neglecting your children. Maybe you haven't spent enough time with your children. There's a ton of things that regret can build up over. So we have more regrets about things that we didn't do than things that we did. But you have to find the silver lining in things. I'll give you an example. Like, you can say, I regret my bad marriage, but I have my children. And without the marriage, you wouldn't have had your children. So you can look at it that way. We can use regrets to clarify our values and guide us in future decisions. You can reframe it like this. If you said, if only I did this, you can say, what if I did this next time? The goal isn't a life without regret, but a life informed by it for a better living. So think of it that way. Regret is a signal pointing you toward a life well lived. So listen to it, learn from it, and move forward with purpose. Okay, so let's talk about what regret really is and what it isn't. Before we talk about how to live with regret, we have to be honest about what it actually really is, right? Because most people misunderstand it. And what the true meaning of regret is, let me see, here are my notes here. It's a definition I pulled off the internet. Regret is a self-focused negative emotion about something that has happened or been done by us. We feel bad because we did or didn't do something, or we believe we should or shouldn't have done something. So regret is not the same as guilt either. It's not the same as shame, and it's not always proof that you did something wrong. A lot of regret comes from clarity that just arrived too late. You made a decision with the information, the emotional capacity, and the awareness that you had at the time, and now you're looking back with more insight, more maturity, and more perspective. Regret often shows up when growth has already happened. You don't regret something until you've outgrown the version of yourself who made the choice. So think about that. If you were still that same person, you wouldn't feel regret. You'd repeat the same behavior. Some people may not experience regret because some people are selfish and they experience so much guilt that it roadblocks them to regret. So regret, in some strange way, is evidence that something in you has changed. But here's where people get stuck. They treat regret like a verdict instead of a signal. They say, I should have known better, I wasted time, I ruined something, I missed my chance, and they let regret turn into self-punishment. But regret isn't meant to keep you stuck in the past. It's meant to inform you how to move forward. We'll discuss that more in detail later. So there's also a difference between true regret and false regret. True regret teaches and false regret tortures. So false regret is when, you keep replaying the past, not to learn, but to hurt yourself. It's when you measure your entire worth by one season, one decision, or one outcome. And that's not reflection, that's self-attack. So true regret says, I see something more clearly now. I understand what I didn't then. I won't carry this forward the same way. And that distinction matters, because if you don't learn how to hold regret correctly, it either turns you into bitterness or it turns into fear. Bitterness keeps you stuck in the past, and fear keeps you from trusting yourself in the future, and neither one helps you grow. Regret isn't proof that you failed. It's proof that you're awake now. And the goal isn't to erase regret. The goal is to use it without letting it use you. That's where the conversation really begins. If you ask people what they regret as they get older, they say things not done. They don't regret mistakes. It's usually things that they didn't do. It's very interesting. So let's talk about in relationships, after someone lets something good go, and then they realize later that it was really a lifeline, and then they regret losing that person. That can be very overwhelming, and some live with that for the rest of their entire lives. I've read story after story on this. I talked in one of my earlier podcasts about this conversation I had with this gentleman about one of his best friends who had left his forever girl. He called it his forever girl. He was madly in love with her, and he thought she was madly in love with him. And they parted ways. She ended up moving on. He ended up finding someone, a great person. And he's been married to her for 20 years. It's a long, long time. And he still lives with the regret. He never told his new wife, but he lives with this regret. He still says, I should have never left her. I should have made that work, because he believes that was like his soulmate. And he's in a 20-year beautiful marriage. He's got kids and everything. But he told this guy that I know that for 20 years now he's been living with that regret. That's a long time to live with that. But it happens. I want to talk about regret after you have lost a loved one. And I'm talking like from death. So say somebody that you loved, was very close to you, and they passed away. And now you have to live with that regret of things that I should have done this, I should have spent more time. This is a regret that people live with every day of their lives. And it's hard because we beat ourselves up over this stuff. And then we also have to live with regret of people who aren't dead. So people who are still living. You have to live with that regret as well. as they're alive. And that is really hard to do. It's a different kind of regret than if you lose somebody that has passed away, but this can also eat you up for the rest of your life as well. So it isn't just about missing someone. You don't just lose the love, you lose the version of yourself that was made possible through them from being with them, because both of you become somebody who you are while being together. And silence doesn't fade. It lingers. It defines you. Regret is in the shadow of neglected responsibility. Responsibility in relationships isn't just about showing up physically. It's about showing up emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. It's about recognizing that another person has offered you access to their vulnerability and to their time and to their hopes and their dreams. And that demands respect. When someone fails to take responsibility for how they affect the person that they claim they care about, that's love without responsibility. It will definitely lead to failure in that relationship. And a big mistake is thinking that the other person feels the love the same way you have. You don't know what's in someone else's heart. You can assume or think that they will never leave you, or they will always come back because you're inseparable, or it's your soulmate, or you're forever, or whatever you want to call it. But if all that stuff I just talked about doesn't happen, you're going to go right back into the regret because the relationship failed. And that regret hurts, man, and it hurts really bad. When you also have the person that has to live with that regret, that, like the guy talked about earlier, that let his forever go and he's been living with it for 20 years. It's tough. And then we use the statement, loving someone unconditionally, very lightly. When you truly love someone, there are conditions. You have to respect them. You have to honor them. You have to be loyal to them. You have to love them as yourself. But some people use that word unconditional as no matter what they do, that person is still going to love them. And that's not how it works. Because when you're treating people not like the way you want to be treated, like cheating on them or disrespecting them or degrading them or putting them down or whatever it is, however you want to say it, that's not true love. And you can lie to yourself and you can fight it as long as you want. But in the end, you'll see that it's not true love. And in this modern day, you can assume you will find somebody like your mom, like the old-fashioned loyalty and the old vows. Well, dealing with a different kind of woman in this day and age, it's just the way of the world. And I'm not saying you can't find a good woman, but the modern women of today are definitely not like the women of old. Sadly, it's not that far away generationally. So there's a scripture King Solomon quotes, and he says, I found one man in 1,000 I can call a friend, not one woman. And there's many interpretations on this scripture. I was led to believe the interpretation this way. So if you line up 1,000 men, that's a lot of men. It doesn't sound like a lot, but count to 1,000. So Solomon is saying that I found one man in 1,000 I can call a friend, not one woman. That doesn't mean that you can't call a woman a friend or there's no good women. To me, that means that if it took 1,000 men before you can find one that you can call a friend, it might take 10,000 or 20,000 to find a good woman. I think it's pretty much saying that when you find a good woman, hang on to her and cherish her, because a good woman is rare to find. That's what I get out of the scripture. So go and find that scripture yourself. Do a little research if you want to read it. It's King Solomon. I'm not sure if that's the book it's in. I think it's in Ecclesiastes. But we can change and fix things so we don't live in regret. We tend to cling on to the past, but that robs us of the present. We can miss out on so many new beginnings when we let regret take hold of us. And this can happen in other situations, not just relationships, like a job. You could get fired or maybe not get a promotion because of something that you did or you didn't do. That's a regret as well. And guilt, anger, and fear can also place us in regret. Try not to relive the past because it will breed regret. So be careful, because we cannot change the past and we cannot control the future. We can change our ways and learn, but the future is not a guarantee. Why does regret hurt so deeply? Regret hurts as much as it does because it doesn't just question what you did, it questions who you were. That's the part people don't like to talk about. When regret shows up, it's not just about a decision. It's about identity. You don't just think, I made a mistake. You think, how did I not see this? What does this say about me? Was I naive? Was I weak? Was I blind? Regret attacks our sense of self. The deeper the emotional investment, the deeper the regret cuts. Because now you're not just mourning an outcome, you're mourning the version of reality that you believed in. That's why regret often feels heavier than loss itself. Because loss says something ended, and regret says maybe I was wrong about everything. Regret also hurts because it plays tricks with time. It convinces you that if I'd known then what I know now, everything would be different. But that's just like a fantasy. You didn't have today's clarity back then, and you didn't have today's boundaries, and you didn't have today's emotional awareness. So it's easy to say, but it's just really a fantasy. You had the version of yourself that existed in that moment, and that version made the best decision it could have made with what you had. And another reason regret hurts so much is because it attaches itself to meaning. We don't regret things that didn't matter. We regret things that matter deeply. Love, opportunities, time, trust, purpose. Regret shows up where significance lived. And that's important because it means regret is not a sign of emptiness. It's a sign that something mattered enough to leave a mark. But here's where regret becomes dangerous. When you stop believing that regret means I can't trust myself, I ruined good things, I don't deserve another chance. You got to be careful, because that's when regret stops being information. It starts becoming a story, and a story that quietly reshapes how you move through life. You become hesitant, you second guess everything, you play small, you avoid risk. Not because you're wise, but because you're afraid of repeating the pain. So that's how regret steals your future. Not by what happened, but by convincing you it defines who you are now. And that's the lie that we have to confront. Regret's not a sentence, it's a signal. It's pointing to growth, awareness, and change, not condemnation. The power of regret isn't telling you that you're broken. It's telling you that you care, that you've learned, and something inside you evolved. The question isn't, how do I get rid of regret? The question is, what do I do with it now that I see clearly? That's where the next part comes in, because regret becomes destructive when it turns into self-betrayal. And that's what we're going to talk about next. When regret turns inward. Regret becomes dangerous when it stops being about what happened and it starts being about who you think you are because of it. That's a shift that happens quietly. At first, regret sounds, I wish I handled that differently, and then it becomes, I should have known better. That's where regret stops being reflective and starts becoming internalized. You begin replaying moments not to learn from them, but to punish yourself with them. You rerun conversations. You imagine alternative outcomes and different versions of yourself. And the longer that goes on, the easier it becomes to believe that your judgment can't be trusted anymore. And that's how regret turns into self-doubt. You stop acting, you hesitate, you delay decisions, not because you're being thoughtful, but because you're afraid of being wrong again. Regret convinces you that growth requires self-criticism, but constant self-criticism doesn't produce wisdom, it produces fear. And fear doesn't make better decisions, it just makes safer ones. There's another layer to this that's harder to admit. Sometimes regret isn't about the decision itself, it's about the meaning we attach to it. We didn't just choose something, we believed in it. We invested emotionally, we committed mentally, we pictured a future around it. So when it falls apart, the regret feels personal. It feels like a failure of discernment, not just circumstance. And that's why regret often carries shame. Shame says you should have known. You ignored the signs. You let yourself believe something that wasn't true. Here's the truth that gets missed. Most regret doesn't come from stupidity. It comes from sincerity, from trusting, from hoping, and from trying to build something meaningful. Those aren't character flaws. They're human qualities. Regret doesn't mean that you were weak. It just means you were engaged. And here's the critical distinction. There's a difference between responsibility and self-blame. Responsibility says, I see what I would do differently now. Self-blame says, I'm the problem. One leads to growth and the other one paralyzes you. If regret leaves you clearer, it's useful. If it leaves you smaller, it's toxic. You're allowed to acknowledge mistakes without rewriting your entire identity around them. You're allowed to learn without condemning yourself. Regret doesn't ask you to stay stuck. It asks you to integrate what you learn and to move forward differently. And if regret is still loud, it's often because there's one more piece missing. Forgiveness. Not of someone else, but of yourself. That's when it all starts to shift, when you say, what is regret actually teaching me? Regret doesn't exist to torment you. It exists to inform you. The problem is most people never finish its job. They either drown in it or try to outrun it. But regret, when handled correctly, has a very specific purpose: to refine judgment, not to erase self-worth. Regret shows you where expectation didn't match reality, where intention didn't align with outcome, and where belief moved faster than truth. And that doesn't mean you failed. It just means that you learned something that you couldn't have learned any other way. There are lessons you can get after the fact, after commitment, after investment, after loss. And that's uncomfortable because we want lessons before consequences. But life doesn't work like that. Wisdom is usually learned retroactively. The danger that comes when regret turns into rumination is when you keep asking the same question over and over. How did I not see this? That question feels productive, but most of the time it isn't, because you're asking it not from the perspective of what you know now and not what you knew then. You didn't ignore the future, you just didn't have access to it yet. Regret teaches discernment, not hindsight perfection. It sharpens your ability to notice patterns, it recalibrates your boundaries, it forces you to slow down and evaluate what you trust and why. That's its value. But when regret stops being useful, it becomes permanent residence. You got to be careful. You're not meant to live inside the lesson. You're meant to extract it and move forward. And here's the hard truth. If regret didn't hurt, it wouldn't change you. Pain is the signal, and integration is the goal. And integration looks like this. You don't repeat the same mistake. You don't carry the bitterness forward. You don't let the experience harden you. You become more precise, not more guarded. You become more aware, not closed off. You become more grounded, not more fearful. Regret humbles you. It reminds you that other people have agency. That outcomes aren't guaranteed. That sincerity doesn't always protect you. That's not pessimism. That's realism. And realism is the foundation of better decisions. The goal isn't to eliminate regret. The goal is to make sure regret doesn't get the final word, because when regret is integrated, it becomes wisdom. And when it isn't, it becomes identity. And one of the most damaging things people do with regret is confuse responsibility with punishment. They think, if this hurts, I must have deserved it. If I feel guilty, I should just keep paying for it. If I regret something, I should suffer longer. That mindset doesn't make you accountable. It makes you stuck. Responsibility is about ownership, and punishment is not. They're not the same thing. Taking responsibility means acknowledging your role honestly, without exaggeration and without denial. It sounds like, this is where I contributed. This is where I ignored something. This is where I chose emotion over clarity. This is where I stayed longer than I should have. That's responsibility. Punishment sounds like, I should have known better. I'm stupid for believing that. I can't trust myself anymore. I deserve what happened. And that's not accountability. That's self-attack. And self-attack does not produce growth. It paralyzes you. You can take responsibility without rewriting your character. A bad decision does not make you a bad person. A misjudgment does not invalidate your values. A season of confusion does not erase your integrity. Regret often shows up because you were trying to do something meaningful, not because you were careless or malicious. You trusted, you hoped, you invested, and those aren't crimes. They're human behaviors. Responsibility says, now that I see more clearly, I'll choose differently. And punishment says, I'll never forgive myself for not seeing it sooner. Growth requires humility, not self-contempt. Responsibility accepts limits. Punishment defines them. And here's the shift that matters. Once responsibility has done its job, it should release you. If regret keeps demanding payment after the lesson is learned, it's no longer teaching, it's controlling. You don't owe regret your future. You owe it your attention, briefly, and then your action. The moment you start living differently, you paid the cost. Anything beyond that is unnecessary suffering. Regret isn't asking you to disappear. It's asking you to evolve. And evolution requires compassion towards yourself. Not indulgence, not excuses, but fairness. You don't become better by tearing yourself down. You become better by integrating what you learned and refusing to repeat the same patterns. That's responsibility, that's maturity, and that's where regret finally starts to lose its grip. One of the most damaging things regret can do is turn into identity. At first, regret's about an event, a decision, a moment, a season. But if you're not careful, it stops being something you experience and starts becoming something you are. You stop saying, I regret what happened, and you start thinking, I am the mistake, I'm the problem. This defines me. That shift is subtle and it's dangerous because regret was never meant to become a label. It was meant to be information. When regret becomes identity, it distorts everything. How you see your past, how you interpret your intentions, how you imagine your future. You stop filtering your entire life through one outcome. But no single chapter is allowed to claim your whole story. You are not the worst decision you ever made. You're not the moment you didn't know better. You're not the version of yourself that existed before clarity arrived. That version did the best it could with the awareness it had. And awareness changes over time. Here's something important. Regret feels heavy because it arrives after growth. You don't feel deep regret without having gained perspective. That means regret itself is proof that you are not who you were then. But when people turn regret into identity, They freeze themselves into a version they already have outgrown. They replay the same mental tape. If only I had. If I was smarter. If I didn't trust. If I left earlier. That loop feels like reflection. It's actually self-punishment disguised as something else. Reflection moves you forward. Rumination keeps you stuck. And here's the difference. Reflection asks, what did I learn? And rumination says, what the heck is wrong with me? Regret is supposed to sharpen discernment, not erase self-respect. If regret is costing you your confidence, your ability to trust yourself, or your willingness to move forward, then it's no longer serving its purpose. At that point, it's hijacking your identity. And your identity matters because identity drives behavior. So if you see yourself as the one who always messes things up, you'll hesitate, you'll overcorrect, you'll second-guess instincts that are actually healthy. You heal it by updating who you are. And that means acknowledging that I'm not that person anymore. I see more now. I would choose differently today. That doesn't erase the past. It contextualizes it. Regret is not meant to follow you forever. It's meant to escort you to insight and then just step aside. If it stays longer than that, it starts lying to you about who you are. You are allowed to grow past regret. You're allowed to carry that lesson without carrying all that weight. And you're allowed to move forward without dragging an old version of yourself behind you. Regret's a teacher. It's not a life sentence. And the moment you stop letting it define you, it loses its power. One of the hardest truths to accept about regret is not everything can be repaired. Some things can be fixed. Some things can be addressed. Some things can be owned, apologized for, and corrected. And some things can only be accepted. A lot of suffering comes from trying to repair what is no longer available to repair. We replay conversations. We imagine different timing. We rewrite outcomes in our heads. We believe that if we explain ourselves better, love harder, or understand more deeply, something will reopen. But repair has limits, and maturity is learning to tell the difference between what requires effort and what requires surrender. Repair is appropriate when you caused harm and you can take responsibility, but repair is not appropriate when the other person's unwilling, the situation is fundamentally changed. You're trying to fix something to avoid grief. That's not repair. That's bargaining with reality. Regret often convinces us that if we could fix the past, we wouldn't have to feel the pain of the present. But pain avoided doesn't disappear. It just relocates. And here's the difficult part. Closure is not something that another person gives you. It's something you build on when you stop expecting the past to cooperate. Many people stay trapped in regret because they confuse accountability with self-punishment. They believe if I keep feeling bad, it means I care. If I let go, it means I didn't matter. If I move forward, it means I failed. None of this is true. Taking responsibility doesn't mean carrying guilt forever. Caring doesn't require ongoing suffering. And moving forward doesn't erase what was real. There's a point where regret has delivered its lesson, and anything beyond that becomes resistance to acceptance. Acceptance does not mean approval. It means acknowledging what is without fighting it, and fighting reality is exhausting. Some relationships can be repaired, some cannot. And some endings happen not because effort wasn't lacking, but because alignment was. And that's painful, because alignment is something you discover, not force. You can do everything right from your side and still not be met where you stand. That doesn't make you wrong. It means you're reaching the edge of your control. This is where regret often needs to be reframed. Instead of asking, how do I fix this? The better question becomes, what is this teaching me about myself? What patterns do I see? What boundaries were unclear then? What truth were you avoiding? What did you learn about what you need, not just what you want? Those answers matter more than the outcome you didn't get. Repair focuses outward, and growth focuses inward. And when repair isn't possible, growth becomes the responsibility. That doesn't mean you stop caring. It just means you stop chasing. There is dignity in knowing when effort turns into losing yourself. Regret that leads to wisdom is useful, and regret that leads to obsession is corrosive. You don't honor the past by staying stuck in it. You honor it by becoming someone who lives more truthfully because of it. Some things get repaired and some things get released. Both require courage. That's where real maturity begins. Regret has a way of sitting heavy on the heart. It shows up in the quiet moments when you're replaying decisions, conversations, or seasons that you wish you could rewrite. Psalm 103, verse 12 says, as far as the east is from the west, so far as he removed our transgressions from us. God does not hold your past over your head. He's not replaying your mistakes on a loop. He does not define you by moments that you wish you could undo. When you bring regret to him, he responds with mercy, understanding, and grace that wipes the slate clean. I just had a conversation with somebody about this yesterday. Regret says I ruined it, and grace says I can redeem it. Regret says you should have known better, and Jesus says I'm shaping you. Regret points you backward, and Jesus points you forward. The enemy loves to use regret to trap your mind, but God uses conviction to free you. Conviction leads you closer to Jesus. Regret without grace keeps you stuck in the shame. So, when regret rises, do not run from God, run towards Him. He is not surprised by your humanity or your weakness. He knew every choice you would make, and He still called you, still chose you, still planned a future full of hope and purpose. Isaiah chapter 43, verses 18 and 19 says, "Forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing." God's heart is not to erase your story, but to redeem it. Even the chapters you wish did not exist can become the very places where His glory shines the brightest. Sometimes the moments you regret become the lessons that shape you, soften you, and draw you deeper into His presence. Nothing in your life is wasted, not even your mistakes. If regret has been weighing on you, breathe this truth in deeply. God is not done writing your story. There's more ahead. There's more grace, more healing, more restoration than you have dared to imagine. So let your past become your testimony and not a prison. Let your regret become a teacher, not your identity. Let God turn "I wish I had not" into "look what He brought out of it." Regret doesn't disappear just because you understand it. You can gain insight, you can take responsibility, you can grow, and you can still feel it. The goal isn't to eliminate regret. The goal is to stop letting it decide who you become. And a lot of people believe that healing means no longer feeling this ache. But healing usually looks like learning how to carry the ache without letting it distort your choices. So don't move forward by pretending the past didn't matter. You move forward by letting it inform you and not imprisoning you. Regret becomes dangerous when it starts narrowing in your life, when it convinces you that the best days are behind you, when it tells you that something ended badly, everything else will also. That's not the truth. That's grief speaking without balance. The past does not vote on your future. It only gets to teach. And once the lesson's learned, regret no longer has authority. Only memory does. There's a difference. Memory can coexist with growth. So living forward means accepting that some chapters end with resolution, some conversations never happen, some apologies are never heard, some outcomes never change. That doesn't mean that your life is smaller now. It just means it's different. You don't owe your future the same mistakes just because your past had them. One of the quiet shifts that happen when people begin to heal is that regret stops being the loudest voice in the room. It doesn't vanish, it just loses control. You start making decisions based on who you are now and not who you were then. You choose steadiness over urgency, clarity over fantasy, integrity over rewriting history, and that's growth most people never talk about. You don't get over regret, you outgrow it. You carry it differently. You stop using it as a measuring stick. You let it rest where it belongs, behind you. Living forward doesn't mean you forget. It means that you don't keep paying for something that you've already learned from. There is a point reflection turns into rumination, and when that line is crossed, the work is no longer insight. It's self-protection disguised as thinking. At some point, you have to choose movement over memory. And that doesn't mean rushing. It means allowing life to expand again. Regret wants you to stay still. Growth requires motion, and motion doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be small, it can be quiet, and it can be simple as choosing not to replay the same moment again and again. You don't need to redeem the past. You need to live honestly in the present. And if you do that, if you take what you've learned, if you stop abandoning yourself, if you stop bargaining with what's already happened, then regret no longer defines you. It becomes part of your story and not the author of it. And that's how you move forward without erasing what mattered and without letting it hold you hostage. I'm actually going to be putting a couple of songs in the description. These are songs that don't just sound like regret, they kind of carry it. So the first one is Vince Gill, Go Rest High on the Mountain. Vince Gill wrote Go Rest High on the Mountain. It was as a goodbye that he never got to say in time. It came from losing people he loved and watching others struggle in ways like he couldn't fix. The song reminds us that regret isn't about what we did wrong. It's about wishing we had more time, more words, and more chances. Sometimes regret is simply love with nowhere left to go except heaven. So that's the first song. The second one is Garth Brooks, The Dance. The dance is one of the most honest songs ever written about regret. It says something most of us struggle to accept, that even though the ending hurts, the experience was worth it. Regret tells us what should have avoided the pain. The song tells us that avoiding the pain would have meant missing the life. And the third song is Brad Paisley and Alison Krauss. It's called Whiskey Lullaby. Whiskey Lullaby shows us what happens when regret is never processed. When guilt, shame, and heartbreak are numbed instead of faced, they don't disappear, they destroy. This song isn't just about drinking. It's about what regret becomes when it's left alone with no hope and no healing. And the fourth song is Against All Odds by Phil Collins. Against all odds is regret spoken out loud. It's the voice of someone who knows they may never get another chance, but still can't stop hoping. This is the kind of regret that keeps people stuck, replaying conversations, wishing for one more look, one more call, and one more chance to be chosen. These songs all say the same things in different ways. Regret isn't just about the past, it's about how deeply we are loved, how we cared, and how human we really are. The danger isn't feeling regret. The danger is letting regret become the place we live. So I'm going to pull up this prayer right here. And I've been closing some of the podcasts with prayers. Some of you have told me they like the prayers, so I'm going to ask you to pray with me right now. Lord, the places in our hearts still wrapped in regret, help us to release what we cannot change and receive our grace for what lies ahead. Redeem our mistakes, restore our hope, and lead us into the future you have prepared for us. We come to you without trying to clean this up, without pretending we have peace when we don't, without rewriting the past to make it easier to carry. You already know the places that we wish we could go back to, the words we could change, the moments we could replay, the choices that still ache when we slow down long enough to feel them. We ask you for wisdom, for clarity, for growth. Help us learn what regret is meant to teach us without letting it become a weight that follows us everywhere we go. Teach us how to take responsibility without living in shame, and how to remember without reliving. How to move forward without abandoning what mattered. If there are things we need to own, give us the courage to own them. If there are things we need to forgive ourselves for, give us the grace to do that honestly. If there are things that we need to let rest, give us the strength to stop reopening what can no longer be changed. For anyone listening who feels stuck in the past, remind them that growth does not require perfection, only honesty. That regret does not cancel purpose, and that learning is not the same as failing. Help us live forward with integrity, with humility, with steadiness, not rushing, not hiding, and not turning away from who we've become. We place what we cannot fix in your hands. We carry forward what we have learned, and we trust that our lives are not defined by our worst moments, but by how we choose to live after them. Amen. So, in closing, I just want to leave you with this. Regret isn't proof that you failed. It's proof that you cared, that you were invested, that something mattered enough to stay with you. The problem isn't regret itself. The problem is what we do with it. Some people let regret turn into self-punishment. Some let it harden them, and some let it convince them that they're stuck as the person that they used to be. But regret doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're aware, and awareness is the beginning of change. You cannot undo your past. You don't get to rewrite moments. You don't get to make everything right. You do get to decide what kind of person moves forward from here. You do get to decide whether regret becomes a lesson or a life sentence, whether it teaches you honesty or keeps you stuck in silence, whether it sharpens your integrity or slowly erodes you. Growth doesn't come from pretending things didn't hurt. It comes from facing them without letting them define you. If you're carrying regret now, don't rush yourself, don't try to outthink it, and don't turn it into shame. Sit with it, learn from it, let it inform how you live, not control how you see yourself. The goal isn't to live without regret. The goal is to live with clarity, to move forward more honest than before, and more grounded than before, and more intentional than before. That's how regret stops being something that follows you and starts becoming something that shapes you. I appreciate you being here with me today. Stay strong, take care of your heart, take care of your peace, and keep moving forward as life cracks you open, even when it's uncomfortable. And remember that your integrity is your legacy. Treat your neighbor as yourself, because karma has no favorites. This is it for this episode of Cracked Open. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you soon. I love you all, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Cracked Open. If today's episode spoke to you, please share it with someone who might need a little light in their own dark season. Remember, even in brokenness, there's beauty waiting to be found. Every crack is a place where the light can shine through. Until next time, stay true, stay hopeful, and keep your heart open.